Hi everybody, welcome back to Rancho Cordova Arts presents art tutorials. My name is Cheryl Gleason and I am one of the many artists who have brought you hopefully some useful tips and some fun projects for either yourself or your kids. Today I'm going to focus on mark making. Now this could be translated to any type of art, whether it's acrylic painting, watercolor, although Marcia really is the expert on watercolors. But I want to get to how we can make unique marks using things that you might have around the house, things that you may have looked at and thought, oh gee, that's kind of unique, I wonder what that does, and just to see kind of what we can utilize for making a mark. So I'm going to use a wide variety of objects today, and so let's get started, okay? All right, so here is my surface. So what I have here is a piece of paper that's kind of a waxy surface. I use that as a temporary palette. I'm going to use this to put my paper down on. Now I'm just going to use some cardstock that I have lying around, and I'm just going to make it into smaller pieces so that I can actually create kind of I guess a template of what the marks look like. So for example, let's just utilize a little blue, and I'm just using a really inexpensive craft glue. You don't have to use anything too expensive, that's for sure. And I'm going to add just a wee bit of water with that. My handy brush there. And then just going to mix that water in a little bit. That's looking good. Okay. Yummy goodness. So what I've done is I've created I found some different things like spreader scraper that I've had. I've used for wax. I've used it for, it's got some unique edges on it, if you can see that. And you can pick these kinds of things up in hardware stores or whatever. This one has little square edges. Home Depot, Lowe's has things like that. This was something that came in some piece of machinery or like sandwich maker or something that my mom bought, and it has this great ability to create some marks. So I saved those, so I got a couple of those. I took a little piece of wood, just a chunk of a 2x4, and I wrapped it in different ways with rubber bands, creating a stamp that we'll use. So that's one of our objects. I did another piece where I took a rope and wrapped it around, stapled it onto the wood, and we'll use that as a way to make marks. Another one that I did was create a stamp. I took another piece of 2x4 that I had laying around, and I created these bits of styrofoam from a previous project that I showed you on how to do printmaking. So I created that, and then I just put a little drop of glue on and glued them on so that we can create a stamp effect. So we've got that. Little piece of corrugated cardboard. That makes some nice lines in that, so we'll do something with that. There are things in which you can buy, like these, they're very rubber and pliable, and they can move the paint around on your painting. Those can be quite handy. They come in different sizes and shapes. Some that are just little flat so that you can kind of move the paint around without a brush. This is just it's not a toilet paper roll. It's a little thicker than that, but this makes a great stamp as well. I got a cork because, well, I bet we all have a few extra of these lying around because of this quarantining. So I could do a whole stamp collection just with corks. And what I did was I took my X-Acto knife and I just cut into here and created some ridges so that you can see that it'll only print on the flat surface. So that's how I created that. I also have a couple palette knives that are unique, that have a unique edge on them, that can be quite useful. A piece of copper pipe that you can dip in and make some circles. We'll do some of that. This, I took some skewers, those wooden skewers that you know, for the Barbie. I took a few of those, snapped them off, and then I put tape around them so I could create kind of my own. If I couldn't find something like this, this is one way in which you could create that same effect by just things around your house. Leaves, pieces of plants, that can be a great stamping effect as well. I have a bunch of these metal shapes. Those can be great. Any type of sponge makes a great, you just want to make sure to clean it out so that you can get that. We've got, I'm going to show you how to do a print off of just some aluminum foil to create a print using this and a Q-tip. Okay, so we'll show you that process. Now here's where you get to use your all those toilet paper rolls you got. So what I did was I just took a pair of scissors and I went in and I snipped all the way around, and then I kind of flattened it down. And what this does is it creates this almost flower technique, and I'm sure you could come up with some very different ways in order to do this, to create some interesting things out of toilet paper rolls. This is one that I did, that I had this little paint roller, and I took and I put some rubber bands around it so that created a different sort of technique. There are ones that you can buy that are sort of rubber in Michaels. That's this is actually, I got this at KP Market, and giving a little shout out to our friends at KP because they have some interesting things in their little housewares department. And this is a beauty face roller. Now I've never used it on my face, but I thought it might come in very handy as a texture creator for painting. Little bubble wrap, probably have a few little bit of that around. Some cheesecloth, okay. Utilizing our printing technique from our to-go containers on the styrofoam. I also created a stencil with a piece of styrofoam, which I found that didn't work as well as just cutting out some of my own stencils with the cardstock that I'm using. So something that's a little thicker, that, you know, it's not as thick as plastic and obviously will degrade over time, but I think it'll work for our purposes here. When I see shapes and different things like this, I save these things to think, oh, because I could, you know, do some spray paint over that and create some unique images on paper or on paint canvas. So those are what we're going to do. So let's get started. So we've got a little paper there. I'm just going to start by, let's use this paper roll. So I'm just going to dip that into the, and you can see that this might be one of those, since I did a few yesterday, they might not show as well the second time around. So this might be one of those things that doesn't create a great image time after time after time. I had some that I did the other day that I saved, but I don't see them around. So, but this is something that you can create some unique flair too. the cork creates a nice stamp effect. You can make a whole design with these. They can create some great shapes. Obviously, I've just done a little bit of a pattern in there, but you could really do anything you want. Some of the really bumpy corks actually have a good texture in and of themselves without even creating that. But this is something fun that can put some different image on your something like this. We can utilize by taking a little bit of painting our, which I showed you in the printmaking with styrofoam. And we just press that down a little bit, get that print on there. There's no reason why you couldn't use this on your canvas. And sometimes, you know, after the second or third one, it actually even can create a better one because you really start to see some of the texture in that crevice there as it sort of dries out. Now that one obviously didn't work as well. Now along that same technique, we have the use of, I'm just going to cut this in half. I've basically taken a piece of aluminum foil, okay? And on that aluminum foil, this is kind of like, you can create a monoprint, but you could do this to create some abstract pieces to put on a canvas as well. So what you do is you put a nice layer of paint, not too thick, but of your acrylic paint. And with this, you have to work pretty fast because, as you know, the acrylic dries out really quite quickly. We want to get a nice even coat on there. Then we take our Q-tip and we're basically reducing or taking away the paint using the Q-tip. And this is creating our print, okay? So we have our flower. You might need to, as it gets more full of paint, turn it on a different edge, use a different side, or leave it and it'll create a different look. Then you can take that, and I'll flip this over, and you can put it down onto your paper. Give it a good crease in there. And then just lift it up. And you've got basically the print that you made. Now you can use this over and over, but I find acrylic paint on aluminum doesn't work all that great. These make great just little easy ways for kids, very inexpensively, to create a monoprint on the cheap, right? A $1 thing of craft, some couple Q-tips and some aluminum foil, and you are ready to rock and roll. Now, some of the other items that we have, I really like this. This makes a really great print. And depending on how much paper or paint you have on there, what type of paper, your first ones can come out really thick, and maybe that's kind of the image you want, but sometimes showing where the paint disappears, that also is a really cool sort of image as well. So that's our cylinder. Along that same idea of the cylinder is our copper pipe. Anything that is round, you're basically just creating a stamp. Okay, so that's some easy ways for those items. So let's get a different piece of paper. Now, I always like to wipe these off just to make sure that I can utilize them again without a bunch of clumpy paint on there. All right. And it really doesn't matter what. I would do some practice, create some templates, do some practice runs so that you can see what type of marks these tools that you've made do. For instance, we'll try the KP facial one here. It has some little knobs in there. It makes kind of a real unique little, which is super cool. I think it's way cooler on for art than it probably is with your face. But this is definitely a super cool pattern. Okay, I'm going to put that in water so that paint doesn't dry. Okay, now let's use some of our stamps that we made, and I could use any surface. I'm going to use this short surface. I'm just going to dip that in the paint. Now, you can use different rope will give you different patterns. Maybe you want something that looks like this, and as it gets lighter, it'll change a little bit. Or you could get it sort of painted up and then create some different marks such as that. Okay, so that's one way to do that. So we'll set that aside. That's our rope on a block. Okay, and then let's move to doing the roller that I've done some rubber bands on and see what that gives us. Okay, so I'm just going to wet this down a little bit because it's starting to dry out a little bit. Before I do that, let's just do any of metal pieces. You could use cookie cutters or different things. I also use these in encaustic because I can get these down to make a dent in the wax. Some of you may have seen a piece that I have done called Deconstructed Flowers, and I used this very one. But this can create some unique and great shapes. Now, if you are a kid out there watching this, don't go and take all of Mom's cookie cutters and clod them up with some paint, because she might not be extremely happy with you about that. All right, let's do a little corrugated. So I'm going to dip that in the paint. Pressing down on that. Well, let's see what kind of, oh, that's nice. And I can imagine something like this would also look very good if I wanted to use it as to drag across or create some lines, some interesting lines in a painting. Okay? All right, so that's that. I'm running out of spaces to put my wet paint items on. Now, this works much better with inks, this piece that I've made, as opposed to painting, just because it doesn't hold the paint very well. It does okay, but it more makes these sort of short bursts. I actually think it works much better in the process of painting some paint on and then creating a relief or a takeaway in the lines to create some cross hatching. I don't know if you can see that really well, but creates a much better texture that way. Okay. All right. So that was our homemade skewers. Again, figuring out how they work best is part of the fun of it. Now I'm going to use the rubber band. So I've just taken rubber bands and put them around this block. Now I'm just gonna put it on there and get some paint on there and see what we come out with. Oh, I like that. That's got some nice, interesting textures of sort of thick and thin and going in different directions. I rather like that a lot. So some of these can be a little more blotchy depending on how much paint you got, how hard you press, if you're trying to be very dainty about it, if you couple them together in making multiples, that can create some unique shapes and different forms on your paper or on your canvas. All right, so let's try a little bit of, this is a time-honored tradition with a lot of artists who do different printing or use found objects around the houses to create texture by using bubble wrap. So you're just pushing that on there and then lifting up, and you get this great texture like that. As you layer on some different textures with, say, a transparent glaze over that and some marks, could really make a very interesting background for an abstract painting. So if I had a painting that I wanted to utilize some marks, I might want to use a stencil. Now this one I just created with my X-Acto knife and a piece of cardstock. You don't want to use really extremely wet paint when doing this because it will it'll run in between or underneath. So you can also use a stencil brush, which is a very thick, stiffer brush to kind of dab in to these areas. I do have some of those, but I tend to use a regular brush. So when you lift that up, you've got some great marks on your painting from that. So let's get a little bit more paint on our palette here. It's starting to dry out a little bit and get a little low. And there goes my phone. So I'm just going to mix that up a little bit. All right. So this is the one I made out of the styrofoam. And because it's much thicker, it doesn't work quite as well as the paper did. Now you can see that I probably have something on my finger where I dabbed that, or on the back of the card itself. This one's a little trickier because it is so deep that you really have to get the brush in to those crevices all the way around. So getting in there and getting those crevices, something like this is particularly difficult because you've got all these little ridges, and trying to get it to be perfect as the stencil is nearly impossible. But if what you're doing is kind of an abstract look and you just want to get some cool ideas and lines and textures and things in there, then this works perfectly well. So as you can see, because it sits up so high and you can't control this, you get a little of the over bleeding in there, which is why the stencil cut out of cardstock works a whole lot better, in my opinion. But this too is an option. Okay. All right. Now let's, I really love this texture here. It's one of my favorites. All right. Let's see what our homemade stamp looks like. I think this is going to be more. Now you could dip it like that, or you could just brush on the paint, which I think is a more effective way to go in terms of not getting things in big clumps. But what's nice about the 2x4 is it's just really good for the width of your hand. And with this, you can kind of get up and get a nice big push on it. Now that probably won't work on a canvas because you can't press really hard, but if you're working on board or you're working on a more rigid substrate like a panel, that would work really, really well. The old-fashioned toothbrush makes an interesting, mark. You can create some different texture using a toothbrush that you sort of can't get, and depending on what your toothbrush looks like, you can get different types of textures. And so you can almost get this wispy stippling effect, which once you're working on a painting and you want this sort of wispy stippling effect, that can be kind of very interesting. All right, now let's see what we have with utilizing some cheesecloth. Now I'm going to take this cheesecloth and I'm going to cut it. And let's see, I haven't done this, so this is this could be a failed response, or it could be just absolutely brilliant. But taking it and dipping it a little bit in our paint is probably not the greatest way to go, but let's just see what that gives us as we pull it away. Okay, I really like what's going on in there. So there's probably an easier, better way to do that. But that's some really interesting technique in there. So let's take that idea. What would happen if we just use the cheesecloth right on the canvas or on our paper and painted through it? What happens then? Like I said, I've not done this, but I thought this was a great type of. And then what happens when we remove it? Yeah, I consider that a failed attempt, quite frankly. I think if you had gloves on and you wanted to create the more webbing effect of this, putting some paint on there and then just rubbing it into the painting, creating the wispiness, that would be a much better way to go. So we'll work on that. we're not claiming to be professionals here. We're just trying to give you some ideas, some ways to make different marks, some ways to create some abstractness on your in your paintings if that's the look you're going for, creating some texture. Maybe you're trying to create a background that's very abstract, but over the top of it you're painting a very realistic image. So this one I've taken a regular roller, little roller, and I've wrapped it in randomly in with some rubber bands. So utilizing that almost looks like a wood texture. Now you can see here, this is where the roller hit, but these lines are definitely where the rubber bands are. So I think if you really did more of the rubber bands and then did this, you could probably create a really great image of some wood. But maybe this sort of is something that you're looking for to create some basic marks thrown in there so that you can then go in with a brush or with some collage or some paint and do some other marking on that. So that is, oh, I didn't show you the leaf. Let me show you the leaf. And then we will kind of review and talk about our next video that'll be coming up, which will take some of this to a different level. The leaf, I just got that in the wax or in the paint there, and I'm laying it down. Now I don't know where my brayer is, so I'm just going to use a piece of PVC pipe that I have, and I'm just going to roll over that. Now the first one is very paint intensive, but when I did this the other day, the next one and the one after that really comes out quite lovely, making the faint images of the leaves themselves, which you can see here. And so I really like when I can start to see the leaves. Now these particular leaves don't have a ton of distinction and cracks and crevices and in the spleen, but you can get the idea of making some. You can use a pine cone, you can use different types of leaves. If they're too squishy, they'll kind of just really become problematic because the leaf itself will be squished into the work, and that's a whole different art project on eco art. But this will give you a start as to how to start making some mark makings, utilizing some tools that you might have around the house. And that's it for today. So I hope everybody's staying safe. I hope everybody is healthy. And please post anything that you have for us on our website at Rancho Cordova Arts Facebook page. We'd love to see what you're doing. Give us comments. Give us ideas of what you'd like to see, if there's something you'd like to learn. We really appreciate you tuning in as we all go through this. We hope that some of these videos have given you a little bit of comedy relief maybe, and some different ways to think about your art. All right, this is Cheryl Gleason for Rancho Cordova Arts saying I'll see you next week.